thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for coming to look at the Essex Serpent this evening. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Jenelle.
I have to be careful because I have cheated and seen an additional episode, so I'll try to avoid any good spoilers. And the funny thing is, like, most people would consider themselves so lucky to have like one great series in a year, and you've had two. Within a year period. Like, could you spread the wealth a little bit? Let some other people...
Well, I think there are more series than just the two that I've been in.
It's the only ones I watch.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure that's true. No, I've been... I feel so grateful and so fortunate the last couple of years of really interesting material. Loki, the series on Disney Plus, and
you're allowed to clap. It's okay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
They're obviously very different, and but both very deep. Actually, both very rewarding and enriching in terms of the material they're exploring.
And I know Essex Serpent is based on Sarah Perry's 2016 novel, and I know you're very well read. Did you know the book already?
I didn't.
Really?
I'm not that well read. I was aware of it. I was actually tangentially aware of it. I think it was published in 2016, but it feels as if it's been around for much longer than that. It feels like it's because it's conjuring an old world with very resonant, very timeless themes. I was finishing Loki, and we had a week left, and so I got sent these scripts, and I read them all, and I was immediately engaged with it. I loved Clio Barnard's work. I met her years ago.
This is the director?
The director, yeah. I'd met her years ago at the London Film Festival. She had a film, The Arbor, which was screening there, and I was in a film directed by Joanna Hogg, and called Unrelated, and we sort of met and chatted. But I'd followed her work through The Selfish Giant and Dark River. Just found the combination of the story and her, and it just seemed really appealing. Different, new, deep. There was going into deep water in more ways than one.
Pun intended.
Pun intended, yeah. So, that's... And then I obviously read the book, and I found the book. The book's brilliant, really brilliant.
Now, here in America, we're familiar with the Loch Ness Monster. I did not know that the Essex Serpent was a real myth, if that's a thing.
Yes.
And I felt kind of bad about that until I found out that the author didn't know about it either until fairly recently. Yeah. Are you familiar with the legend?
No, it was new for me. It was an ancient, I suppose, a local folk tale from Essex. The easternmost east coast, immediately east of London, is Essex. And it's a very ancient part of England. It's, I think if I'm right, it's kind of where the ancient, when the Vikings came over, they came across Essex and Suffolk, and it's a very, very kind of wild marshland, and still is very tidal. And so it's not possible to develop any property on it. So still parts of it look the same as they've always looked, because the tide comes in, the tide goes out. So it feels I think actually the Essex marshes are where Magwitch comes out of in Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. This very kind of...
Which you know because you're well read.
It's Charles Dickens. I don't know how well read that makes me. But,
sure, everyone's read it, right?
I can't remember the beginning of your question, Jenelle. I got lost in Essex and
just Dickens. If you were familiar with this myth.
Oh, no, yeah. So no. But I love the idea of before television, before radio, when communities were local, and therefore they had their own local stories, and that there would be these kind of folk tales that would be told at particular times of the year, or rituals, or stories that you told your children, or children told to each other. They're very rich. Folk tales are always there for a reason. They're there to kind of explain something mysterious or unknown, or about something we're afraid of, maybe. That we create these myths because we're afraid of something, or there's something we don't understand.
I just learned this word, which you probably know, cryptid. Cryptid, which is like Bigfoot or Mothman or the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, are you someone who generally believes in those things, or you don't put too much thought into it? Because your character clearly does not.
again, I understand why they exist, because we create stories, collectively we create stories to explain what we don't understand. If a child wakes up in the middle of the night and thinks there's a monster under the bed, it's a psychological externalization of some internal anxiety. And maybe that's what we do as communities, is if there are things we don't understand, we create external embodiments of those things in monsters, Loch Ness monsters, Essex serpents. Maybe they're symbols of something wild and untamed and frightening and scary. But of course, what Sarah Perry and Anna Simon, who's adapted this, has done so brilliantly is, of course, it's about so much more than is there something in the water? And of course, that's the question. But you've got a period in time, late 19th century, 1893. Charles Darwin has just published Origin of the Species. It's going to change the way we understand life and the way we ascribe meaning to our lives. And Cora, played by Claire Danes, is an educated woman. She's curious and she's motivated by this desire to know. But this is all located in a very faithful and God-fearing community. And science and faith or reason and religion are coming into conflict. My character, Will Ransom, is a vicar, a pastor, a reverend. So, of course, you've got these sort of themes of sin and virtue and love and fear. And at the time, when communities were organized around faith, that's how they understood, I suppose, what we would call the unconscious. Mm-hmm. It's the serpent. There was a serpent in the Garden of Eden. Naomi, played by Lily Rose Aslan Dogdu, says, "Why does the serpent tempt Eve?" Sarah Perry has chosen this folktale for a reason. She's trying to tell a certain kind of story about the conflict between science and or reason and faith, and the ideological conflict between the two is from where do we derive meaning in our lives? Do we depend on reason? And the Dr. Luke Garrett is forging ahead into life with reason. I'm gonna, I can cut open a human body and work like I can, in the same way we pop the hood of a car. I'm gonna see if I can restart the engine. He's surging into the future with reason, and my character's kind of is holding back in using his faith, and then Cora comes into the middle of it and with her curiosity. Anyway, I'm like.
Well, that's too bad because they're here to hear me talk. So I am curious, though, because you excel so much at playing what we might call untrustworthy characters or people who kind of keep us guessing. And Will is so, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's so trustworthy. He's someone that people can turn to. Was that part of the appeal of taking the role?
Certainly, yes. I really was drawn also to this genuine debate, which is dramatized in the relationship between Cora and Will about meaning, really. I think there's a great mystery in what lies beneath the surface of the Blackwater estuary. Is there something in the water? Is there not something in the water? What is in the water? Becomes a symbol of something that is not yet known and not fully understood for every single character. And that becomes destabilizing for everyone. And what I was intrigued by was Will Ransom is somebody who's calm and collected, and his responsibility as a vicar and a reverend is to contain the anxieties of his parishioners and calm their superstitions. But he doesn't have all the answers. And in a way, it felt very resonant for our time. We've been through such uncertainty and been asked to manage uncertainty, and managing uncertainty psychologically is challenging. And sometimes if we don't have all the answers, our imaginations can rush in to fill the void, and often with the things that can distort our sense of reality. And so in a way, this ancient tale felt very contemporary. So I was drawn to that. I was drawn to this internal shaking up of everyone's stability, that they think they have things figured out about how they're living their lives, and they don't quite.
I was thinking about that because, sorry again, but in future episodes, you really get to see how this is more timely than ever. I mean, you're dealing with sort of crowd hysteria and the way that, rumors can have a physical effect on people.
Yeah.
And how also people of completely different beliefs really have to work together in order to make things better. And I'm sure that was discussed ad nauseum on set.
Yeah. I mean, it was so obvious in a way that we discussed it initially, and then of course the work becomes the kind of trying to calibrate the nuance of who knows what at any given time. But yes, rumor and untruth or misshapen truth can spread through a community like wildfire, and it can be very dangerous, because then it distorts people's sense of their reality, and they change their behavior, they change their actions, and then suddenly you realize a whole community of people are acting from a place of fear and misinformation, and their minds are distressed with imaginings, and it's very destabilizing to see that, for sure.
Was it ever challenging? Because I always think about, first of all, you're shooting this during a pandemic.
Yeah.
You're in a place that looks like it can be very isolating. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's actually a crazy party town. But
I can confirm, but at least I didn't see it.
I just expect like the camera to pan 6 feet and there's like a carnival or something. You never know. But watching it, like I did sort of wonder. And when you're dealing with these big issues, is it hard? Are you the kind of actor who takes your work home with you? Did you find it, like not the best place to be, the best mindset?
I found it just really stimulating because it's so psychologically rich, and Essex itself, the East Coast, we were in places like the Tollsbury Marshes, Malden, the cliffs at Cudmore, a place called North Fambridge, and they're very, very wild in terms of the landscape, where the land meets the sea. Oddly enough, it was a relief to be outside. Like, it was so windy, and already the science had filtered down that it was very difficult for the virus to be transmitted outside, and in some of the winds we were dealing with, we think COVID's going to have a really hard time here, because it was just so windy and it's coming across the North Sea. It was pretty chilly sometimes and wet and muddy, but I kind of relish that. It can be very evocative as well when your boots are in the real marshes, and suddenly the first assistant director is calling time because the tide's coming in and we're all going to get washed away. Those skies actually have a very rich history of being a great inspiration to painters, the Turner and Constable, and that people went out there to paint because the way the sun would set and create these kind of many, many layers of light in the sky. So it was a very inspiring place to be. And obviously Sarah Perry's from Essex, and she clearly knows that she's just, her roots are so embedded in that soil. And so, yes, we were in a bubble. We were in our own kind of coastal bubble with all the wind inside it and the mud and the rain. But it didn't feel isolating. It's, we had a great crew of wonderful people, and who are very committed and capable, and we sort of went for it.
So in that scene we saw tonight when you're wrestling with the sheep in the mud, that's not acting. That's just you genuinely frustrated.
Well, there is a little bit of acting involved, I'd say, but only because the sheep was not a real sheep.
What?
No. It was, so I was having to kind of puppeteer the sheep as well as trying to rescue the sheep.
I'm genuinely impressed. I don't know. Have you seen Annette?
I have seen Annette.
Okay, so because I think
it's not quite there. It's not quite. Yeah.
No, because I think about how you're really performing for two people.
Yes.
Because you're imbuing an object with this. Fascinates me. I really thought it was a real sheep. Well done.
Well, there were real sheep on the edge of the water, but actually it was very. There was just we talked. There were I think conversations about it long before my involvement, and I think that any sheep would be too distressed in that environment, and the water. I'm not sure the quality of the water, and so yeah, there was a kind of, I guess it was a structure of the sort of internal skeleton was just made of wires and then wrapped in this coat of real wool, and then I just got into the marsh and wrestled it.
It's amazing.
Or tried to rescue it rather, but yeah, it was weird, strangely heavy. It was a very heavy. Yeah. Claire and I at the end of that day went, wow, this has been a workout, rescuing this sheep. It's such an amazing way for those two characters to meet, because he's distracted, and I think in the book it's all from her point of view, and she sees this man who sort of looks like he's part of the land. He's just covered in water and mud, and you can't really tell the difference between where the marshes end and he begins. And he's kind of grunting and is sort of pre-man. He's just making noises. And then he's dismissive and very cold, because he can see that she's obviously not from around, she's down from London. He's already starting to get frustrated with this curiosity about the serpent, because he knows that, it's all very well you coming down from London with your educated ideas, but there are people here who are very afraid, and if you start saying this Essex Serpent is real, then their lives are going to be very unhappy. So he kind of dismisses her, and then of course they begin a kind of connection through their intellectual debate.
Moving on from the inanimate co-stars, I want to talk about the cast in this show, amazing. Because it's just, but that's something that seems to go wherever you go. You always seem to be a part of these really amazing ensembles.
I'm lucky. I was so fortunate. I mean, Claire Danes was involved before I was, and she is wonderful. Just such commitment, she's so bright and so spirited, and she was our fearless leader on this. It's Cora is absolutely the center of the story. She was also really game and quick to laugh. Some of the weather and the physical extremity was you have to be it's good if you can find a way of being in those situations and muddling on, and she's so good at that. But has an amazing capacity for. Cora goes on this extraordinary journey, and the delicacy and sensitivity with which she depicts that is really, really remarkable. And Frank Delane, who plays Dr. Garrett, who I think is a revelation, he's got such energy, and he's so mischievous and playful, and you can feel his growing affection for Cora, but also his ambition as a young man. He's trying to make his way in the world, and he's correct about certain things, No one's performed heart surgery yet, but they will be able to, and he's, in his own way, he's changing the world. Hayley Squires, who's
fantastic.
Every time, she's just the most truthful performer. She just is the truth whenever you point a camera at her. And Martha is a really interesting part, because, she's there helping Cora and her son Frankie, but she's also got, as I think you'll see as the story unfolds, she is read Karl Marx, and she knows change is coming, and she's got her own political ambitions, and so it's really interesting that she's kind of embedded or been folded into the world of this aristocratic widow, but she's also got her own completely motivated story. Jamail Westman as Spencer, who's just brilliant, played Hamilton in London as long as the run.
Wow, really?
Ran, yeah. Who plays Charles Spencer, who's Dr. Garrett's confidant and friend. And there's a wonderful story with him and Martha. And Clémence Poésy, who plays Stella, Will's wife. And she's... Stella plays a hugely important... I think actually the whole story is about Stella. In a way, the Essex Serpent could be described as a Gothic romance. In some ways, it's about love and fear. And maybe the serpent represents fear, but the story is also about love, and Stella's love, in a way, is, I think, the most some of the most transformative or most profound love that there is. Again, the serpent for Stella represents something unknown, something that is deep, that is not yet known. I don't want to spoil anything, but she was terrific. Working with Clemence was fantastic. And some young actors as well. Lily Rose, Aslan Dogdu playing Naomi, Dixie Eggerichs playing Jo, my daughter. Who am I missing? I must be missing people. There's so many great actors in this, truly.
The Sheep we talked about.
The Sheep is great.
You're covered there, yeah.
And Michael Gibson, who plays Evansford, who is the other religious figure in the church, the curate, who's much more fundamentalist in his Christian doctrine. And as the superstition starts to take hold and talk of the devil, you know, you see, I think in that episode, you see Evansford starting to get very high church. And he and Will start to disagree about how to manage the collective anxiety. And he's brilliant. It all gets very kind of like The Crucible.
That was a brilliant expertise to continue watching the show, which, by the way, premieres on May 13th, Friday the 13th.
Yes.
I don't know if that was intentional or not.
That's above my station. It's up to Apple.
But that is when the first 2 episodes will air. Again, congratulations on another great show. It's
Thank you, Jenelle. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.